You've gone silent. What's happened?
Morning,
Okay.
everybody, and welcome to today's Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. Online, we have our chair, David Shand, live from London. It is 8:30 at night in London. So welcome, David.
And it's 0 degrees.
0 degrees, so it's a little bit warmer here, although overcast. Online, we also have Miles, our Treasury Advisor from Bancorp, and Councillor Cooper. So just in terms of standing orders, because our chair is actually attending today's meeting remotely, we would normally default to have today's meeting chaired by our deputy, but we don't have a deputy for this committee. So under standing orders, I'm opening the meeting. I will ask for nominations for a chair for today's meeting. So to the committee, can I please have a nomination to chair today's meeting?
I'd like to
I nominate David Cochrane.
There you go. The chair's already done it.
So,
and I'll second that.
So we have a mover and a seconder for our independent David Cochrane. All in favour? Against? None? That's carried. I'd like to invite David to please come to the chair position. Thank you.
Should we have a deputy?
I was actually just going to suggest, in terms of, do we actually want to nominate a deputy here as well, so we can deal with this situation a bit easier next time?
Well, in case our chair load before me.
Oh yeah, just in case. Well, we've got the defib around, so we'll be right. But just in terms of if this situation happens again, do we actually want to have a...
Yeah.
Right, okay. Thank you. Well, bear with me if I miss calling anyone to speak. It's just because I'm not familiar with the technology. It's nothing deliberate, so please bear with me. Let's open the meeting. There's no mana whenua representative. No one's asked for a sign interpreter. No one seems to think that Te Reo is their first language, so I'll read it in English. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just, so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion. Thank you. Apologies. I have a few. The Mayor, Janet Holborough, Richard Mansell, Darren Edwards, and Sam Nicol from EY. Can we have someone to move to accept? Right, thank you. Declaration, we'll take that as passed unless anyone, yeah, right. Declarations of interest, any declarations of interest from anyone? Public speaking, no one's requested to speak. No deputations. Members' business, anything anyone wants to raise? Right. Updates, none that you know of. Fine, we move to reports. Can we deal with those, please? And I think that takes us to 9.1, which is somewhere in here, page 6. Thank you. Right, the Treasury report. We've got Miles online for this, haven't we?
Yes, we do.
Good. That's great. Thank you, Miles. Thanks for being with us. Anyone have anything they want to raise on this?
Just a question about the economic commentary, which I presume was written prior to the American election. So,
Yes.
is there? Can you update us on any changes in the interest rate scenario as a result?
Yeah. There's been quite a big change actually. So when this report was written at the end of September, interest rates were, medium and long-term rates were actually bottoming out. The US 10-year Treasury bond yield got down to a low of 3.59% or so. Today it's 4.4%. And it's actually had quite an influence on what's happened here. So at the end of September, the markets weren't really pricing in a Trump win. And throughout sort of the second half of October and then the second half of October and then into November, they started pricing in the more of a likelihood of a Trump win, and that was pushing the US bond yields up. And the global benchmark for bond yields is the US 10-year Treasury bond yield. And the reason why that they were pushing it up because of a possible Trump or more of a likelihood of a Trump victory was because, one, the tariffs are inflationary. So he's going to substitute, cheaper imported goods from Asia with more the US can't manufacture goods, at such cheap prices as the Chinese can, obviously, because of some of the labor market practices. So that's going to lead to an increase in the price of a lot of goods. I think the US has about a $300 or $400 billion trade deficit with China. Just a little interesting fact is that I think Walmart imports 2% of China's GDP. So you can see that it's quite significant. I read the other day that the tariffs, an economic consulting firm, did some analysis and worked out that it would cost $2,600 a year extra for the average American household because of the imports, substitution of cheap imports. And the other reason why, so that's inflationary, and with inflation comes less likelihood of a substantial cut in the federal funds rate, the same as our OCR. It pushes inflation up, it pushes bond rates up. The other one is that Trump's policies are seen as more inflationary. His policies, his tax policies are going to cut taxes, and it's going to lead to bigger deficits. It's going to lead to increased borrowings, and that will push up US bond yields as well. So that's been the big change. Now, there's been quite a change in the shape of our yield curve over that period because. I'm just having a few IT problems here. With some reason, my computer has frozen on a screen, but I know what's there. Our yield curve has changed shape. So our short-term rates have gone down, and that's as the OCR has fallen. We're now down at 475. We are expecting another cut in November down to another 50-point cut, which will take it to 425. But our longer-term rates have gone up. Now, they've gone up about half to two-thirds of what the US has actually gone up. So while we follow our bond yields are influenced by US bond yields and global bond yields as a result, they haven't gone up to the same extent, but they have gone up. And our yield curve is now what we call positive sloping from year 2 onwards. And that has pushed up. So swap rates from two years onwards basically have actually gone up. And the forward start swap rates that we've gone, that we took advantage of, which I'll mention in a minute, have actually gone up quite considerably, about 50 basis points, a lot of them. So nothing's changed in New Zealand. We've still got we've still got the likelihood of that we'll go into a triple dip recession. But I was at a presentation by Stephen Topless yesterday at the LGFA Day in Wellington, and he said, well, this talk about, we were in recession, then we went out, now we're going back into it. He said, really, we've been in a rolling 18-month recession. So at the moment, things are not looking good in New Zealand. The unemployment rate is going up. Retail sales are plummeting. Business confidence, though, has improved since the August monetary policy cut, since the OCR cut in August and the subsequent cuts. And some of the forward-looking indicators are actually looking quite positive. There's a series of data that the Reserve Bank look at, and it's a series of sort of what they call high-frequency data points. And one of them, say, for example, is the Truckometer Index, which measures the volume of heavy trucks going past various data points around the country, and that has shown an improvement. Business confidence has improved, consumer confidence has improved, and so I think that at the moment it's sort of, the old saying, it's darkest before the dawn. we're probably in a pretty dark period at the moment, but maybe we're looking a little bit more positive going forward. So that's been the main change since the September report.
Thank you.
David, could I ask a question here, please? Look, on page, thanks very much for this presentation. I just wanted to note that this is a new format for reporting on Treasury performance. And it's prepared by Bancorp, which is fine because you're giving us a fairly different perspective, and particularly a macroeconomic perspective, which I think is an important background of the whole thing. But if we look at page 13, you've got the Kapiti Coast DC. There's a box on the left-hand side, interest rate projections, which show there's been a fall up till the end of this year, and it's forecast to go up again. Are you saying that what's there is in fact going to be even more emphasized possibly by the Trump victory, that in fact our interest rate projection may in fact rise further than you've got in that table on page 13?
This was the data at the end of September. So
exactly,
yes, that line, the red line, which is your projected cost of funds, will go up further. Well, it still will go down, but I think it may not go down to the same extent, but it will go up, and that's simply a function of the yield curve. Now, prior to the Trump victory, the markets were projecting the 90-day rate to get down to 3%. Now they're projecting, that's the terminal rate. Now they're projecting it to be at 3.7. My view is that that revision to the upward move is actually a wee bit overdone at the moment. And it's not New Zealand centric. It's nothing to do with New Zealand, but unfortunately we're influenced by US bond yields. But the good part of it is that some of these market projections are influenced by swap rates. And what will actually happen in reality is that the OCR is totally dictated by the Reserve Bank. That's all it can be, is what the Reserve Bank set it to be. The 90-day rate very closely correlates to the OCR. But some of these rates that that are embodied in those projections are a function of US bond yields. So I'm not sure that the upward revision that if I redid that graph now, I'm not sure if all of that upward revision will eventuate.
Thank you. Just before we go on, welcome to Councillors Coфord and Provanov. Just to let you know, we've got Glenn online and David Shand online.
Now, is there any other questions? I've got a few more points to make.
Look, can I just follow, if you don't mind, can I just follow on and say, as a result of that, are there any changes we need to make in terms of managing our interest rate risk?
No, not at the moment. Unfortunately, we're beholden to the markets, and we can do what we've got with the current interest rate settings. The sharp rise up in bond yields wasn't predicted by anyone, I don't think. Not an 80-point correction to the US bond yields, but I'm thinking that maybe it's a little overdone unless Trump really does enact some fairly aggressive policies. It's ironic actually that in all the years I've been doing this job, for the last 10 years or so, you never mention a US president unless it's Trump. And that was in 2016 to 20. I gave a presentation at a local government conference, and one of the first things I mentioned was Trump, and I've never ever mentioned his name before. So unfortunately, we've got to deal with what we've got in front of us at the moment. But I think we will get some relief. What we have done is, since the last report, I'll come on to that. Are there any other questions?
Not from me, thank you.
Anyone else?
Just a comment from me, David. Just a comment from me. Look, as I said, this is a new format, and for the first time, this is prepared by Bancorp rather than our own Treasury staff. I actually found it a very useful presentation, and perhaps a bit more focused on the key issues in the previous approach. So I just wanted to compliment Bancorp on the format of this new reporting on Treasury management.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, we've done it. We've put a bit of work into these. We used to do sort of longer-winded reports prior to starting the ones with you, with other councils, and we've moved to what we call this dashboard format. So what we just like to make it is visually acceptable and visually readable. So that's why we have, the boxes, the numbers, the graphs. We do have the commentary at the beginning. Some don't actually read it all the time, but what we just try to do is get the key points there so you can see at a glance without having to do a whole lot of reading. We always think that graphs are better than words. So no, thank you for that endorsement.
Just noting that this report is prepared by you, whereas previously the reports we've had have been prepared by our own Treasury management team.
Yes, that's right.
Miles, can I ask you, that graph that you've been talking about in the bottom corner of page 13, in September 2030, which is still quite a long way off, the rates literally fall off a cliff. Is that, is that based on anything, or is it really a don't know from September onwards?
No, what it is that you have a lot of swaps. I think you have about 40 million of swaps mature in 2030, and it just leaves you with one swap that matures in 2031. So that's just the effect of 5 or so swaps falling off and being left with one quite low swap. I think it's about 182, and that matures in 2031. So no,
it's all yeah. Thank you. That's a big help. Just the other point, the one we raised in the pre-meeting, was it's a bit scary when you look at page 12 and the debt is 355, but that's gross debt, and you've got to take 87 million of term deposits and stuff off that number. It's a bit scary when you see it the first time around.
Of the so we've got pre-funding in there. Mark did mention to me that we will actually just tidy up the graph, just make a bit of an amendment to it so we can actually show in that graph the annual rolling maturity profile graph what the pre-funding is.
Thank you.
The one other point which I think is quite important, if I can just make it, is that all right?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I'm not sure what page for you it is. On my page, it's interest rate risk management. And you can see the graph at the top
left. Page 13.
Kapiti Coast debt and cover. The green is the swaps that you've got now. Up until September, we weren't policy compliant, but you had enacted the new policy bands. Would you like me to explain, because this is a wee bit of a departure from what you were doing, would you like me to explain just what that graph means? Or you're okay with it?
No, the answer was yes, please.
Yeah. Okay, so we have the debt is in grey. The reason why you have that little drop at the very beginning is that the effect of pre-funding. So debt that was pre-funded actually, the debt matured in October, but it had already been pre-funded. That's why there's the drop in October. We have just changed the hedging bands, what we call the fixed interest hedging bands, which are down on the right-hand side of that page. So we break it down into 0 to 2 years, where the minimum percentage you must have is 40% and the maximum is 100%. So the bottom red line, which goes out to September 26, is 40% of your debt. So it's 40% of the total projected debt. And the top line is obviously 100%. Then in the 2 to 4 year period from September 26 to September 28, you have a minimum of must have a minimum of 25% of your debt covered and a maximum of 80%. So that's the bottom red line and the top red line, again, based on all of it's based on the projected debt level. And then in 4 to 10 years, you have a minimum of 0, but you can have a maximum of 60%. So those are the bands that you have your fixed rates operating within. Those are the parameters. And the green line is the amount of fixed rate cover that you've got at the moment through the use of interest rate swaps. Does that make sense?
Yep. Bernie, you've got a question?
Yeah. So even though our rate increase this year is 17%, but we still continue to borrow, and our borrowings don't seem to have been reduced. So why would we continue to borrow money rather than pay some of the debt back?
I'm not sure that's for Miles. It's probably more for Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. So when we work through our budgets, we look at our capital. So we actually mainly borrow money to fund part of our capital works program. So we've obviously got a 10-year 10-year capital works program, and when we look at what we're going to spend, we then say, well, how much do we need to borrow? So first of all, we look at what are we getting in for development contributions, what is coming in by way of rates for depreciation funding, what is coming in from Whakatahi by way of subsidies, and the rest of that is debt. So as long as we continue to actually build assets and renew assets, we will continue to borrow. If we weren't borrowing, we'd be charging a lot more in rates.
Thank you. Any other questions? Or can I have a mover to adopt this report?
Sorry, just one. The one point I did want to bring up, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure.
On the interest rate risk management graph, the debt and cover profile, what we did at the end of September, which is reasonably significant for you, was that we'd been operating outside of policy, the intended policy, because we knew that it was going to be changed from 1 July. So it became effective on 1 July with the adoption of the long-term plan in the new financial year. So we realised that we were under policy, so we took out a large number of interest rate swaps. I think there was 100. Well, there was not to think.
Yeah.
No, there was 105 million of them, and that's incorporated in that green line. So that green line was below those red lines. Now we're above it. The good news is, I'll put it down to good management from Kapiti Coast District Council, was that those rates were done virtually at the bottom of the interest rate cycle as far as medium and long-term rates go. So as I said, short-term rates since the end of the report have continued to go down, but medium and long-term rates have gone up, and those were the ones that we hedged. Now, we did 105 million virtually at the bottom of the market. If we did them today, they would be about 40 basis or 50 basis points, or 0.4 to 0.5% higher. I haven't seen what's called the mark-to-market valuation on them, which means, are those swaps either in the money or out of the money? But I think they would be, I'm guessing, $600,000 in the money now. So if we were to do them now, it would cost $600,000. The rates would effectively cost Kapiti Coast $600,000 more. So it was, as I say, good timing that they were done at that particular time. And you've got rates in sort of 360 and down to about 330 or so, which are fantastic rates, and which will actually help keep your cost of funds lower, and will push it lower as that red line shows.
Thank you, Miles. There's a good degree of self-congratulation going on around the table. Yeah. Sure.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just to make a comment, thank you, Miles. Look, Miles alluded to the fact that we went out to market and issued $105 million of swaps. 80 million of those are forward start. So, and the reason why we did that is, for those of you that have been around the table, we haven't actually entered into a new swap contract for the best part of 24 months, because working with Bancorp, we knew that the swap prices were overinflated. We were waiting for them to come down. So yes, we did do $105 million of swaps, and that was actually to be compliant with the policy. So we needed to come up to the minimum and go a little bit higher. And this is actually the benefit of working with Bancorp, and identifying those opportunities. So in all seriousness, that result, we hedge to protect ourselves against rising interest rates. When interest rates do start to go up, our hedging actually plays benefit to us. When the interest rates come down, it doesn't look so attractive. But that's why we changed and updated the Treasury management policy. So it's a collective effort, and it really does show the benefit of working with an independent Treasury advisor. Thank you.
Thanks. Right. Can I have someone to move adoption of the? Sorry, Lawrence. Want to say something?
That's all right. I just wanted to make clear that what you've just talked about is not in this report, because it took place after this report was written.
No, there just wasn't sort of commentary on it. Sorry, and I could add some commentary on it if you would like. It's incorporated in those graphs. It's incorporated in the numbers, the fixed rate hedging percentages, but not actually in word form. So just trying to get it down into 2 pages. So if you would like, I could actually include a page. I actually think, with the benefit of hindsight, it's a very good idea. Over the last quarter, we can make a commentary. This is what we've done, and this is the positions that we've entered into.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that clarity.
Can I have someone to move the adoption of the recommendations, that we receive and note the Treasury Dashboard report for the quarter and note the Council has complied with all the requirements of its Treasury Management Policy? Thank you, Councillor Craven. Thank you. Seconded. Any debate? Further debate? Thank you. Ayes? Noes? Thank you. We'll move to 9.2 on page 19 of your papers. The Workforce Health and Safety. Kelly, you're going to come up and speak to that? Thanks. I think we've got Rach as well. All right. Oh, I'm Rachel too. Thank you. Oh, Miles, thanks very much for that was really helpful, those explanations.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. We learned a lot from that.
No.
It was great. Thank you.
That's a pleasure. Look, next time, I was actually in Wellington. I had to come back last night though for a meeting this morning. I'll try and make it in person for the next meeting.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. All have a good Christmas if I don't speak to you. It's nearly
Thanks,
Christmas.
Miles.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Right. Well, we're on the Workplace Health, Safety and Wellbeing report. Kelly, do you want to speak to it at all?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. We'll just take the report as read and open it to questions.
Right. Do we have questions? Bernie?
Yeah, I have actually a number of questions. I hope, Mr. Chair, you'll indulge me. It's mainly relating to the graphs and things like that. So we look at page 24, the first graph. It doesn't seem to match. So those numbers on the left-hand side, 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8, you don't say what that relates to, but I presume it's the number of people, is it? Or not?
It's the number of incidents that have occurred
Okay.
in that month.
Okay, so you've got one worker falling asleep at work, and he's listed as one person. So why does it seem to be below the one line? No, the red line, the red one. There.
I would take that as one.
Would you take that as one?
Yeah, that's one.
Okay. Well,
If you look at the orange,
okay.
it's
Okay.
at the same, similar height.
Okay, sorry. Well, I found it difficult. Thank you for that explanation. Second one, the second graph, sorry, and then further to that, you've got July, August, September, and then you've got July, August, September, and July, August, September. What am I missing? Anything?
It's based on the type of event. So you've got event in the first July to September, then you've got illness.
Yeah, but
that
I just
quarter.
thought you don't
And
think
then
you should
injury.
have like 2024 or whatever. It's not confusing.
We can look at adding additional commentary
Okay.
in the next quarterly report.
Okay, so can we move on to the second one then? The moderate severity events by hazard type. You've got there 2 moderate events resulted in injuries that were recorded at lost time injuries. So 2 moderate events resulted in injuries that were recorded as lost time injuries. But when I look at the graph, there's not a graph for lost time injuries. There's one for behaviour, there's one for manual handling, etc. Why is... Do you find... I find that confusing.
Okay, thank you for the question. So that graph is based on the hazard type. Lost time is an outcome of the hazard that has caused injury. So those particular injuries related to manual handling and driving that resulted in lost time.
Okay. And then you go on to say one relating to... I should say thank you for that. One relating to driving and one related to manual handling. So one related to driving. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. No, I've answered.
That was falling asleep at the wheel. That was falling asleep at the wheel, Bert.
Yeah, it
You
was.
said falling asleep.
It
You
was,
said
Mr.
falling
Chair.
asleep at work. You said falling asleep at work, which was
I've got a
wrong.
new chair.
They might have been bored, but that would be a real concern if they fall asleep through water.
Okay, my next question is well-being. On page 27, And then you've got there at the top, a slight increase in use of staff affected by business units reporting, and a group session following the death of a customer at the Coastlands Aquatic Centre, right? Now, that death was witnessed by a number of older people who were in the pool at the time. What, apart from assisting the staff, what did you do, or if anything was done, to assist the people who witnessed the event?
Thank you for the question. So this report in particular focuses on workplace health, safety and wellbeing. Whilst customers may be impacted, our obligation in the first instance is to our people. So that's where our focus
Correct.
stayed with that.
Okay. Then following on from that question, do you have a policy that if an incident like that happens again, or if any incidences happen at the pool, the pool is closed for the whole day? I mean, we've had a couple of deaths of staff members, and I just noticed, but there's no explanation to the users. It just says that the pool is closed. Do you think that can be improved somewhat?
Thanks for the question, Bernie. I think there's a number of factors that play out. One is around confidentiality and being respectful to the family. We were very mindful of that on the day of that event, and we explained to people that the pool was closed for reasons beyond our control. We were not prepared to go into any detail as to why. And the reason for that was the family hadn't been notified. There were family overseas that hadn't been notified. But what I saw from people like Steve and the team at Aquatics, the way that they actually dealt with people who were coming to the pool was really well done. And I think people actually understood that something quite significant had happened. So it was handled very well. There were updates on Facebook. There are updates on our intranet site. So I believe that the team did everything to notify the public of why the pool was closed without breaching any form of confidentiality.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The last question is relating to 4.0. You said the senior health and safety advisor resigned in September. Can I ask roughly how long that person held that position before the person resigned?
Thank you for the question. They were here for approximately 15 months.
Okay, that's all.
Just on that same point, I raised a question with you earlier that it seems like the person went in September and you were saying we'll start recruiting in February, March, which is 6 months between departure and even starting to look. But you've actually explained to us that you're going to start recruiting before Christmas. Well, that's a bit of a concern because pages 20, 21 show we're well behind the 8 ball. However, whatever way we try to cut it, we're lagging. We're not here to find out why. We're here to try and find out how we get better going forward. I think that helps with that. I did have a bit of a question on the visitor one being so protection of visitors. To a large extent, staff health and safety can be an ongoing cultural thing, so you don't have to keep ticking boxes and doing courses. It's good to do it, but it's safety of visitors is one that is of concern because visitor accidents and incidents will get you publicity, which is a risk for the reputation of the council, and it's something that has to be ongoing, especially when we've got ongoing issues with aggression and things like that with people. So can I just ask you to do what you can to? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, look, thank you for that. One comment that I just want to make to the people in the meeting is that, if you look at the report and you think, oh, we haven't made a lot of progress around health and safety policy review, this is the first time since Kelly's arrival here that we've had that crystal visibility over our policies, where they're at and the work that needs to happen, and that there's now a very clear program of work that's been put in place to manage that. So Kelly's worked really well with the risk team, ensuring that we're managing that risk. So whilst we might look at it and go, oh, these are a bit old, yes, they absolutely are. The visibility that we have now around that, thanks to Kelly and the team to actually manage that risk, we have not had that before. So I just did want to make that note. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
David, I just have a final question, which is probably a very dumb one, but I'm always interested in what the ACC costs are and what our premium level is with and our rating is with ACC in terms of the level of risk. My dumb question is, does ACC apply only to our staff, or do we also have liability to customers when various things occur? I can see injuries at a pool, deaths at a pool. Does that involve ACC in any way at all? A dumb question, but I think one that I'm feeling I should ask, right?
You can't say. Okay.
Thanks for the question through the chair. So with ACC, when we're talking ACC, we're only talking about staff, those that are employed by council. That's where our ACC levies are impacted. Death at pools, unless it was through an accident, in this particular situation that's happened this year, that was a medical event. So ACC is not involved in that. And if it was an accident, that would be ACC class as a sporting event or a sporting injury and would not be impacted by council's ACC levies.
It's between the individual and ACC in that case, right?
That's correct. It only impacts the workplace if it was an employee.
Just want to be clear. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Coe.
Yep. Look, I just want to comment on the progress we're making in this area, because there's been a bit of an ongoing issue that we've been grappling with, how to report on this stuff, and so well done on a very clear and concise report. I guess I just would like to ask a question which I've been asking for some time, and I'll say it again because we have new staff in this area, and I just would like to get some feedback on your thoughts on this question, and that is, I guess my feeling is that if any organisation takes health and safety very, very seriously, then it's an organisation-wide issue, and it's something that the highest level needs to be across. And I've always felt that some kind of a summary of the health and safety report should be going to the full council for noting. So I think it's appropriate that it comes to this committee in terms of following up on any actions or improvements or issues and that kind of thing. But I do believe there's a good case to be made for every elected member to be aware of our current health and safety situation and the statistics and what have you. So just a brief summary for noting, I think, would just indicate to staff and to the rest of the world that it's something we take very, very seriously. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that and whether that's something we should be looking at doing.
Excuse me. I actually think that's a really good initiative in terms of the visibility around how we value health and safety. So it's something that we'll take on, and we'll look at what that might look like and engage across SLT and come up with something.
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that's great. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
I'll just observe on that it's pretty much standard practice for company boards now to receive a health and safety report, a cyber risk report. It's at the start of each meeting. Partly, often they're just accepted, but it's partly to infect them with knowledge. They knew that there was a lot of aggression going on, or they knew that something or other, there were a lot of slips and falls at the pool or whatever, and they didn't do anything about it, and they're in the gun because they're in the gun anyway, whether they know about the things or not. So it makes sense. Councillor Pavanov?
Yes, thank you to the Chair. I just wanted to touch on, I suppose, the policies that that are listed there, and thank you, Rach, for providing some comments in terms of this is the first time that we've sort of got quite a good handle on this. I see that most of them are planned in Q3 and Q4. There are actually a lot of them there, and I'm just wondering whether that work program is actually achievable, and whether or not there should be some, whether there's been any work looking at the ones where the highest priority is actually required. And, you'd know better than us based on those policies where there are some, some things that do really need to be done to improve the situation. Obviously, policies are policies, but it's actually what happens that actually does make the difference.
Thank you for the question. So what sits behind this that's not shared in here because it was just too detailed, we've done an initial review across the 15 policies and worked out whether they are partially compliant or they need a complete rewrite. And the reason that there are so many in some of those quarters is we're looking at rolling them up into a single policy. So that's why they're impacted, because 15 policies for health and safety is just too many for any single organisation. So we are looking at simplifying that so that they're better for our employees to engage with.
Are there any huge gaps?
There are some decent gaps in some of them, and there's some conflicting information between the policies. So that's what we are trying to prioritise, so that it's really clear to our staff what the rules are and where there's some area to play in health and safety.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, so this is actually quarter 3, is it? And then
We're in quarter 2 at the
quarter
moment.
2. So quarter 3 starts the beginning of January.
Yeah, and when we list a quarter, that's when the full review of that policy will commence, not when it will end.
Right.
Because some of these policies will be out for consultation, and there'll be a good 6 months backwards and forwards with staff as part of that worker engagement that we're required to do.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing else? Can I have someone to move that we note the report that you've all just been considering? Thank you, Lawrence. Someone second it, please. Thank you, Liz.
Yeah.
Any further debate on the issue? Ayes? Noes? Thank you. We'll move. Thanks. Thanks for that, and thanks for the explanations. Move to 9.3 on page 31 of your papers. Yankee, please. Right, anything you want to say about your report? Anything you want to bring to our attention specifically?
Kia ora kato katoa. I'm taking the report as read and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? I only had one point, and which was just a plea for a bit of plain English in the answer in some of these some of the commentary. For example, on page 43, the explanation is a line and a half, but you could spend half an hour trying to work out what it says. So can we just have more direct? This happened, that happened, and we're planning to do something we might do sometime. It gets a bit. Well, I found it a bit confusing, a bit more blunt, direct. We're not going to start this till then, or we are going to do this, or we'll have it finished by whatever. That would be good. Any comments at all on this? If not,
Yep.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Kate.
Yeah, just as per health and safety, again, I really believe that the summary page, that sets out all the risk areas so on page 35 of the document we're looking at, so that page plus the list of risks, I believe that should go to the full council as well for noting, along with the health and safety report, just for the same reasons that, this committee is charged with, investigating further and analysing and commenting, etc. But I think some of these risks are significant for our organisation as a whole, and again, I believe that the full council, all elected members should be aware of the current situation on these risk factors.
Mark?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I support that, and I think, as we've just heard, I think what we can take back to SLT is we do actually have a report that goes to council, reports and recommendations from committees and standing committees, as well as from community boards. So there is, so I think the discussion is, let's discuss, can these reports go to council? And they probably can. So they could be actually included in that report to council, could actually be the health and safety report. I'd probably support if it was just the summary and the update, there's not a lot of context behind that. So you probably actually want the whole top 10 going to council. So I do support what you're saying, and I think the mechanism for SLT to discuss is through the report to council from committees.
Right.
On its own, I'm not too sure, because it's really just the status update or the progress report or the pages that you reference is just what has been done since the last time. There's not a lot of information on what that risk is, what are the controls, what are the mitigations, and that's probably more helpful to council to see the whole thing, to be honest.
All right, well, maybe we can get some feedback from council as to how
Yeah.
useful they find it.
Yeah.
But, I think in terms of council as a whole, they should really only be concerned if they've got things in the red or maybe in the orange. Other than that, they've got too many other things that they need to worry about. So I don't think they need to know the detail. It's really just highlighting anything that is of significance that needs attention. Yeah. All right, but I'll leave it with you to ponder how you do that. But I just do feel quite strongly, as David said, you go to any commercial board and normally at the start of an agenda is health and safety and organisational risk. And then you move on to the other items of business. And I think we should be adopting some of that good practice in governance from commercial organisations.
Thank you. There's probably a bit of a chicken and egg thing here. Do we suggest that we impose these things on the councils, or do the council and councillors ask the committee to provide it with a report or whatever? And we could go around in circles a little bit. Can we leave this with the senior leadership team on the basis that you come back to us in March, which is our next meeting, and if you're not doing it, tell us why you're not? So then we understand. Otherwise, this could go around. I'm conscious the council has raised it a few times, and it could go round and round in circles. We could bounce between us, senior leadership team, the full council, and back again. It could go round and round. So can we sort of cut through it and say, if you're not doing it, tell us why you're not doing it. There might be really good reasons. Like it's unintelligible, that thing on its own. Page 35 is probably unintelligible on its own. You need more. But can we perhaps progress it on that way?
Absolutely.
Councillor Kirby? Sorry, Cam.
Ngā mihi, Mr. Chair. Long time no see. Quick question, page 67. So we're looking at the heat map regarding basically retention of staff, etc. Number 6, workforce and succession planning. It's showing as ineffective in terms of the control effectiveness rating, but its control next review date they're all the same, 25th of February 2025. Is there anything going on currently to change that ineffective rating to partially or effective?
Absolutely, there's work going on to make this turn effective. And it will probably look different in February. We're reviewing everything before we get to the next meeting. That's why the dates are all the same.
Okay.
Every time we meet, we go through the effectiveness score and re-rate it based on the actions that are being taken. So that work has now started, as far as I know.
Okay, because that sort of seems to be sort of fairly glaring that it's ineffective, but there's no
But that was an
explanation
honest representation at the
yeah.
minute we needed to
And
assess it.
is that a qualitative assessment?
Yes,
Someone's just sort of
it's-
said, I think it's ineffective?
Yes, there is an effectiveness score in the guidance and the policy that we have, and it basically relates to, are there gaps? How consistently is it applied? Is there a process in place? It answers kind of those questions, so it's qualified in a rating.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Ngā mihi.
Councillor Kirby?
I just want to firstly note just seeing the improvement on our heat map of these risks moving in the right direction. So just acknowledge staff's work in that space. And just commenting on the reporting back to full council, one of the challenges with that, and I'll probably stand with the chair on this, is the risk of relitigation and undermining the work of this committee by putting it back into a council space and that kind of thing. As soon as we put reports in there, even if it's the recommendation is note, the history is we tend to relitigate. So I don't want to double work that and undermine the power or the delegation of this committee in its work of risk and assurance. So I think there's some conversations that need to take place there about what is the most effective way to ensure that we're not creating double work and undermining this committee and the authority the delegated authority this committee has in reviewing these kinds of things. So I think that's a good conversation before our next meeting, and I'll stand with the chair on that.
Thank you.
that
My
we get
experience of other organisations is that if relitigation occurs, it's up to the members of who are on both committees to say, look, I'll talk to you about that offline. We've got it under control. This is here for you to note. Thanks for your concern about that point X, point Y. I'll have a talk to you over the coffee about it and to explain what we're doing. But we don't need to we're only noting it. We don't need to get into debate. But it does require those who are on both to be on top of it and say, thanks. Yeah. You're being told, and if you want the detail, you come and talk to someone about it. Councillor Pavonov.
Yeah, thank you. So I've actually just gone and lost the page, and I've found it again, page 49 of our paper. It talks about the climate strategy, and I see that this is actually due at the end of this year, and it's 65% completed. It was my understanding that this has actually been paused, and I'm just wondering about the explanation that we've been provided here on the progress comments.
Chris has got an answer for you, Councillor.
Okay. Thank you. I think Ninka's noted that our assessment is made at the date as of the report, which is true. We have held briefings with councillors since that and continue to do so on the factors relating to the pause of the climate strategy. And just to be clear, when the Coastal Advisory Panel tabled the report for council to receive it, councillors made an additional resolution to pause work that related to the information in that report until further analysis had been undertaken. And we recently came back and discussed that with councillors. So the work related to the climate strategy has been progressed. There is a direction of travel that's in place. We had paused it on the direction of council resolution and have come back and started to discuss that. So the assessment that has been made is on the basis of that, and we are looking forward to progressing that with council in the next quarter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have so I know, being the chair of the Climate and Environment Committee, there's also a environment strategy that I think is due by the end of this year as well. I'm not actually sure if it's actually mentioned in this report, because I don't think it's necessarily being progressed.
It's not mentioned in this report because the risk relates to climate change risk. So we're mitigating climate change risks, and that is done first and foremost by the climate change work in the strategy.
Right, okay, so I can ask.
So it's not a risk control as such in this report.
I think
Chris, did you want to add something?
I did. I do want to make a comment. I endorse the comments made by Ninka, and just will note that our previous update on the environment strategy referred to the Kapiti Whaitua process that's been led or / driven by Greater Wellington, an intention for that report to be received by council so that we could incorporate the relevant elements of that into our environment strategy, given, quite frankly, the significant impacts that the Kapiti Whaitua process will have. That report has recently been tabled, and our council and Greater Wellington are unpacking the recommendations so that we can provide some advice to council about next steps. Following that, we will be able to progress that environment strategy. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Anyone else? Right. Can I have someone to move, please, that we receive and note this report? Councillor?
I move.
Thank you. All right, we're on to 9.4. Sarah, thanks. It's page 70 of your papers.
Kia ora koutou, through you, Mr. Chair. So look, I'll largely take this report as read. It's the standard quarterly legislative compliance report. Just a couple of comments to make initially. So we've had a bit of a discussion offline with David around the risk ratings, and I just wanted to note that the risk ratings reflected in the appendix are resulting risk ratings. So they're the risk ratings that reflect the initial risk rating and then corrective actions. So just wanted to make that comment. The other point to raise is that this quarter the compliance for Lagoima requests is actually 100%, and I just wanted to congratulate the team for that because it's a lot of work for the team and across the organisation actually. So 100% is pretty outstanding across the public sector. So happy to take any questions.
Councillor Coe?
Yep. Look, I have some concerns around the regulatory area.
Yep.
We were meeting 83% or something of our requirements. And there's obviously been a big structural change in that space.
Yep.
Prior to James Jefferson's departure, he was working on a kind of a dashboard for performance in this area. And I know one of the big concerns in the community is when things get delayed, is the communication back out to people that it has actually been delayed and why and when they can expect to hear. And I'm just wondering what's being done to, in those areas, both in terms of the, monitoring our performance closely and communicating out to applicants.
I'll hand that to Chris. Chris, are you happy to speak to that?
Chris?
I am, and I will answer this in the context that the change went live at the end of October. So we're a few weeks in. I want to make an assurance that with those, so I have the resource consents team and building team. I'm meeting with planners and developers to talk about our next steps forward, to re-engage in that process and ensure that the issues that they're of most concern for them are the ones that we are focused on first. We are, and we'll come back to council with that sort of monitoring report or dashboard that you referred to. And we recently circulated round to councillors a new development report. It's an internal council report, but that has some information in the interim just to keep you abreast of some things that are underway. We will be looking to have the dashboard that is a public front-facing report that people can see. I also just wanted to share with you that one change we've already made is we are just working through a process to release decisions on resource consents as we make them so that it's easier to get information for people as they go through the process. So we'll be coming back and briefing you a bit more on those changes. But as I said, it's early days. For me, it's only been about 2 weeks. But just want to say that we're very much on top of it. We will be coming back and sharing with you with our plans and to make sure we've got the tick on the things that matter most.
Thank you, because I think this is an area that flows on and into our, social licence and all that kind of thing, so it's quite important. The other question I have is around why we don't have a Community Arts Council, as noted in your report. Why don't we?
Could you just clarify that? Why we don't have a...
Yeah, you note in here, under the legislation, there's the New Zealand Arts Council Act, and you note in here we do not have a Community Arts Council.
Could I just get a page reference, just so I'm on the same page as you? Thank you.
Okay, it's on page 82. The Arts Council of New Zealand, Toi Aotearoa Act 2014, Section 24. We have no current Community Arts Council.
Brendan, did you have any comment about that? Liz, we might need to come back to you if not.
Yeah, I'd like to set one up.
Yeah.
I'm
there any
sorry,
reason why we can't
Councillor,
have it?
I think all the money's been spent on David's gallery at Mahara, hasn't it?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, come on, come on. That is something which is nice to have, very nice to have.
All right. It's a good point. I mean, you're right, it's highlighted in bold there, so
Yeah.
we haven't got one.
Why not?
I guess the answer is, if you can't answer it now, go away and think about it. Oh, Brendan, sorry, you
Does
want to...
Brendan have anything to say about it?
No, I just have to come back to you. I wasn't aware. So we can have a chat about that. Yep.
Yeah, maybe there's a discussion to be had with Creative NZ, because I can think of a whole lot of people who would be keen to see one established here if we can get some funding. We have the Creative Kāwari Charitable Trust as an existing mechanism that could form the basis of that, and it could be part of our culture and creativity strategy. So yeah, keen to get some discussions going on that front.
And noting from the recent Arts Trail just how much cultural community arts activity there is in this area. It's
right.
actually enormous, right?
Yeah. It's a key plank of our economic development strategy as well, as you know. So, yeah. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thanks. Councillor Kirby.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question on page 79. So this is probably a Mark answer, really, because it's corporate services, reference B1, previously reported matters. And it's related to our non-compliance in regards to the Rating Act and fully complying with that regarding our volumetric charging. Are the changes that are coming through Local Water Done Well, will they address this issue in terms of shifting how we report water charging as part of our rating system? Because obviously there's the option of us to go to CCO, which removes it completely out of our field. So will this address this non-compliance issue that's been ongoing for us?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, it could. It should. Well, it may. It depends on which way you go.
Well, that was
yes,
quite...
no, maybe.
That was helpful.
If we have a CCO, it will. If we have a CCO, it will.
Yeah, depends which way you go.
So is there room in this process for us to submit to central government as they're putting these legislations into place that there needs to be a shift to enable us to fulfil our requirements, even if we go status quo? Because I'm sure there are other councils that will face the same issue of non-compliance.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Chair. Look, it's a well-known. I mean, we sort of raise this quite regularly. We're one of a few councils that have residential water meters. We're one of the few councils that actually, doesn't fully comply with the Rating Act. So it's not a common problem.
It will become more common though as
in the passage
meters.
of time. Yeah, but look, they are aware of it. It is part of the mix. We regularly raise it because we always are non-compliant. So it is something that has been grappled with. Yes.
Okay.
It is something that it's a user charge that technically is called rate, and to me the whole thing is pretty weird because if you use the library, you pay for the book. You take a book out, you pay for it. And wasn't that part of a library rate? I mean, if you don't use water, you don't pay for it. If you don't go to the library, you don't pay for the book. It's a weird anomaly that needs to be addressed, Councillor, and I would expect that this council and others would submit on that. Yeah, sorry, Mark.
So through the chair, look, just for the benefit of the committee, I think I just want to point out what the non-compliance is. So at the moment under the Rating Act, you must issue an assessment for 2 rateable properties showing what the full rates are on that property for that rating year. And with volumetric water charges, you can't. You make an estimate. So that's the breach. So it depends on what the new model is. Just going to a CCO doesn't automatically fix the problem because you still have to, are you doing an assessment? Is it a rate? So there's the big sort of non-compliance is that you can't tell that rateable property what is the total rate. And so it's not an easy fix. And that's why it hasn't been fixed yet. But as more councils are transitioning with Local Water Done Well, it just depends what the mechanisms are for the future. But just so that we're all clear, the current breach that we are breaching it because we cannot give a full assessment. So it's a very minor breach.
it'd be difficult for anyone to say they're being misled because they know what the volumetric charges are.
Oh, absolutely. I was just trying to see if that's going to remove off our non-compliance at some point in the near future, because that would be an ideal time for it to happen, right? It's just my thought, yeah. And just for us to note that we probably just need to keep pushing that button with central government to make sure that it is removed, because it's going to become an increasing problem for councils. Thanks.
Thank
I
you,
have to say,
Councillor.
I see this as a pretty minor issue, frankly, just to do with the wording of the Act. And this is going to apply under any water charging regime, no matter what is in case, as long as the wording is the same. But everybody understands why the non-compliance is there. I don't see it as particularly important at all, really. It's just a problem with the wording of the Act.
Yeah.
That's true. I just want to bring to the committee's attention the concern, and I've expressed this with Sarah and we've agreed to disagree, but item A2 on page 74, we're giving a low and complete reference to effect a breach of a domestic violence order. And I understand that the report is the official's report. I don't want to change it. And it is a report on, now that all the outcomes have been dealt with, it's rated low because the matter's been addressed. It's actually pretty serious. This person, whoever it was, presumably a woman, because most domestic violence orders are women, thought enough about it to actually tell the council that they had the order and wanted privacy, and then when it was breached, didn't let it pass and came back to the council and complained about it. Admittedly, only their email was a release, but you can do a lot of harassing on email, and that sort of thing can go on. So I think it's important. I accept it's addressed. I would quite like to hear just how addressing it in Magic or whatever it's called works. Does it, every time that person's email address go in, does it ping up, hey, she's got a domestic violence order, don't email, or don't, I don't know how it works, but a bit of an explanation. But my concern particularly is that the low rating that we're giving this is itself creating a reputational risk for the council, in the sense that if I were the complainant, or if I were the lawyer acting for the complainant, which is the easiest position for me to put myself in, if I saw this, I'd be onto the chief executive by lunchtime, and if I didn't get an answer, I'd be onto the mayor by the next day, and I'd be saying, I'm going to the media unless you guys sort this out. If you think breaching domestic violence orders is low, and that's the impression we're giving, even though I understand that we're saying it's low because it's been addressed, it's a little bit like saying someone let off a shotgun in the reception, but it's okay because they're in custody. It's just, we're lucky. We were lucky with this. And this thing, plus the fact that there are 5 privacy breaches in a quarter, it's getting close to one a fortnight being reported. I suspect, I'd like to have seen us not giving the impression that we're not taking this seriously, because that's the impression we're giving, even though I accept you have taken it seriously. Do you want to respond, Sarah, and then we'll take...
Yeah, so just
Could I just say, David, I think this is a case of high potential danger, right? High potential danger is what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, thanks, David. Sarah?
Thank you. So just the first point I'd make is, for the public record, to be abundantly clear, I mean, domestic violence orders are incredibly serious. So that is the staff position on that point. In this case, I think where I take your point about the impression, the reference to a domestic violence order could of itself create an impression. But in this instance, we had an issue where, so what happened is within Magic, which is our core, system, customer service system, there's a flag against the customer. So there was a flag that noted the domestic violence order, and it requested that, the name and address not be released. Now that flag, we have multiple systems in council, which is being addressed at the moment through the new ERP project, but at the moment we've got multiple systems. So the flag wasn't also noted in our building system. So what happened is within the team, somebody naively sent an email out and copied in a previous owner, which is a privacy issue. So it's an issue of itself, domestic violence order or not, and we were notified of that, and by the by the individual concerned and immediately took actions to both address the system issue and apologise to the person concerned. So in this case, it was an email address, a generic email that was copied in. So in terms of the risk, we assessed it as actually a low risk of harm, even though a domestic violence order is incredibly serious. And then when we do a risk rate, so we do a risk assessment against each of the breaches, and we do a risk assessment against the likelihood of the risk occurring. So we assess that to be unlikely given the particular circumstances an issue, and that's why it's rated as low. Different circumstances, like if a name or address had been released, then I think the risk of an issue, or, of potentially harm is much greater. So it's a serious issue, and the potential, if the issue that had happened had been a little bit different, if it had been a name or an address released, could have been a different level of risk. But in this instance, this is why it's reflected as low. In terms of, can I just make a point about the privacy as well, just in terms of your point around the number of the privacy breaches. So I actually see this as a positive. So staff and the team and across the organisation, we're focusing on privacy. So for the last 3 years, we have a campaign every privacy week where we do some focused training, education activities for staff. We've increased our focus on the legislative compliance and reporting and making sure reporting is accurate. And there is specific induction training and specific training across the teams. And the result of that is people are attuned to privacy and will tell us if there's an issue, however minor, whether it's copying someone or not. So we report all of that through to this committee, which means that there is, I see it as a positive in that there are more things being reported, but it's good that we know because we can focus on them for continued improvement.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of comments in response. One is you have actually revealed the address, because if you send it to the previous property owner, that property owner knows that a person with a DVO lives in the house they used to live in. So if they go out and tell anybody, and you have actually revealed the person's address as well as their email address, their physical address. And on the question of how many, 5, and I agree. It's great that we're getting them revealed. Probably a couple of years ago, nothing was happening, and you wouldn't be alone in that. But you get the stage of how many is too many, and when do you put in steps like delay send, or those sort of things that, it hit send on an email, you've got 5 minutes to retrieve it. The number of times I've done it, and I'm sure I doubt anyone in this room hasn't done it at least once, has sent something, thought, oh my God, I've sent it to Jane, my sister, instead of Jane, my solicitor. And it, you can call it back. And mostly it's just after in my case, it's just after I've hit send, I realise I shouldn't have done it. So I'm not speaking from a position of great strength here, but we're all human, and maybe we just need a bit more in the way of privacy. I mean, training is good, but it's training people after they've done a breach, which is a bit, how about doing it before, to the extent you can. Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to make a comment about on page 79. This is about the biometric charges. So I need to note that date received was 2014, and that there was corrective action in 2022-23. I'm surprised that there is no exemption in that act to actually apply for, so that can be applied for, accepted, and that can be removed off this risk register. Is that?
So are we.
So there's none.
So there's no exemption. So the reason why it's in 2014 because residential water meters took effect from 1 July 2014.
Yes.
So look, this has been, we report on this once per annum. So it's always in the first quarter of the new financial year. So arguably it should say Q1 24-25. There is nothing that we can do apart from report the non-compliance.
Okay.
Unfortunately, back in 2014, once we'd actually done all that work to get the water meters operational with effect from 1 July, we escalated it to Simpson Grierson. We escalated it to the Crown. We were told back then that the Local Government Rating Act was under review. It's had a couple of little minor changes, but the feedback that we've had is there is not the demand to change it. So
Right,
they're
okay.
happy for us to actually breach the Rating Act,
Okay.
given it's pretty minor.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. So then on page 78, we're looking at the COAs granted and that about 3/4 of them haven't met the 20-day time frame. And here the explanation is that they've been concentrating on building consents and CCCs. I suppose, and I hear that, but I assume that it is a legal requirement to meet the 20-day processing time for this, and so aren't they equally important?
I'll hand to Chris just to speak to this one in terms of importance and prioritisation.
Chris?
Thank you. And I do have Steve in the room, so Steve can let me know if I've missed anything out on this. Back to this part of our business has been with me for 3 weeks. Essentially, our business is focusing on the legislative requirements. We've prioritised them essentially so that we are meeting the ones that we are assessed against on a regular basis, which is our CCCs, which you've referred to. The COAs, whilst important, they do have a retrospective focus to them. And so essentially, I'm going to frame it this way. We're getting to them when we can, and we are prioritising the way that we do that. What I will say is we are going to come and brief you, it will be in the new year, just on some of the work that we have underway and why we're taking the approach that we are. So it is a good question. I think at the moment, we will be able to come back and give you information just on kind of the magnitude and size of some of the things that we're working with and focused on in our building area, because some of it, I will say it this way, there's a lot coming through. We only have so much resource and we do have to prioritise. So that's the short end of the stick.
Okay, thank you. But there is actually a 20-day legal requirement.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have discussed with Sarah that there's quite a bit of pejorative statement in the COA, but as though it's all the applicant's fault. And quite often, I should probably declare a conflict of interest, but it's not in Kapiti. I'm working on a project at the moment where we've got a no CCC, only found out when they got the limb, and trying to fix it. No one currently alive is at fault for it, and saying, well, they've undertaken illegal building work. The people involved haven't. Other people did a long time ago. They're trying to sort it out to sell, and stuck because COAs are not. In fact, Wellington City has got a team just doing that because they've got so many of them.
Yeah, it's a complex matter.
It's complicated, and I accept that, but I wasn't that happy with the things I was saying. Well, they've acted illegally, so tough luck, they go to the bottom of the pile. That might be true in some cases. Some people have bolted 3 caravans together, stuck a bit of tin on top and called it a house. Fair enough, but they're not always naughty people because they've purchased with something,
Appreciate that. Yeah, and I think when we come back and brief on just the magnitude of what we're working through, I think we can unpack that with the relevant committee.
Thank you. The only other point that I'd noted on this was the difficulty of calling something both active and completed, but Sarah's going to address that. So,
yeah,
we don't need to worry.
It's correct, but I think the colour coding's a bit confusing, so we'll fix that up ahead of the next report.
Yep, that's fine. Any other questions? Can I have someone please move that we note the compliance report? Thank you. Seconded. Any debate? I will only vote for it if there's a note in the minutes that I disagree with the treatment of the DVO order. So if that can be noted in the minutes. The item that I disagree with the rating given to A2. If you're happy to note that, then let's vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Any noes? Fine, thank you very much. We now move to 9.5, which is page 97. Came in a different, where the staples changed. Right, what we've got here. It's you, Mark. Oh, well, we don't have to call you to the table, do we?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, standard procedure, take the report as read. We did have a pre-meeting briefing with both Davids on Tuesday, and we discussed a couple of additions that probably should go into the work program. So I'd like to just take you through that actually. So if we go to page 99, so first of all, the correction of an error. So at the very bottom of that table, we've got the capital programs. It clearly shows that that will be in today's agenda. Apologies, I should have actually moved that out to the 11th of March 2025. So this is, there's an internal capital projects board that oversees the annual capital works program, the work that they do that flows into the performance report that goes to strategy ops and finance. However, not only does that board look at the current capital work program, it actually does, I guess, post-project closeout reviews. So it's entirely appropriate that it provides this committee with updates, and it's simply an error. So it should have actually been appearing in the 11th of March column. So we'll add that. Then David Shand did point out that we've already discussed, although at this point it's only verbal, but this committee really does need to have oversight of our independent credit rating. And so we'd like to see some sort of report, some format or some reference in the work program to our credit rating. So that will be added to this table. The credit rating, we normally do our credit rating in July, August. We strive to have the confirmation of our credit rating in July. So we will make an amendment and we'll add independent credit rating, which will come to this committee, targeting to come to this committee on the 29th of July 2025. We discussed whether or not the local water done well, whether any aspects of that should actually be coming to this committee. The discussion that we had is at the minute, the briefings are with councillors and chairs of community boards. There is a paper that's going to council because council actually makes a decision on what is the preferred options. However, there's certainly obviously risks attached to that reform. So on balance, I do agree. Something I think to be discussed at SLT and agreed and discussed with the chair, but there does need to be something with regard to risk of reforms, I think, added to this work program. Not relitigating what goes to council, but more from a risk perspective. There needs to be some visibility. And then lastly, our interim chair today did raise with me, why is there nothing with regards to the annual plan? And the discussion that we had is, well, there's nothing in the delegation for this committee regards annual plans, because annual plans are not audited. Even if we have to consult on an annual plan, they're not audited. However, there are risks associated with an annual plan. So after our briefing and thinking about it overnight, I do think there is value in having something on the work program that indicates we report the performance to strategy ops and finance, but if we are missing a number of KPIs and are flagging a whole lot of risks, I do think there's merit in actually tabling the risks of an annual plan or delivery of an annual plan on the work program. So that's a new addition that I've never thought of before, which I endorse. So we do need to expand the work program for the independent credit rating assessment, something with regards to annual plan, and a new addition with regards to any risks related to central government reform. So that was a very valuable discussion on Tuesday. So from me to the committee, that this needs a few additions added to it, and that will be reflected in the refreshed report that will come to you in March.
Thank you, Mark. There was one other. David Shand raised the emergency management update should be response and recovery separated out.
Yeah.
So that to me makes 5 changes to this report.
Yes.
And I guess like last time, I'm happy to support the report, so long as those 5 things are noted in the minutes for updating. And can we have it, please, before March? If this report's going to be any use to people like me, I want to look at it and go, what's on the table? What do I have to do? What bookings am I making? Is there a meeting I've got to make sure I go to? It would be handy to have that before Christmas. If you circulate, I don't care how informally you circulate it, but if it's updated, just send it around. March seems like an awful long time away. If that's okay.
Noted. Yes, we can do that. It can be formally. The recommendation can be, or the program can be formally adopted in March, but we can certainly send out a revised table of what the work program is, either before the end of this week or next week.
Thank you. David Shand, have you got anything to say?
No, I think that covers the ground perfectly. Thanks very much.
Okay. Councillor Coe?
Yeah, I was just going to say, given the number of changes, I'm not sure we're in a position to to vote on the recommendation in the paper. It should really be, revised and adopted in March, but we can work on an interim one based on the assumption that,
I
in
think
principle, we proceed with what's on there. So if a new one is sent out prior to Christmas and we formally adopt it in March, at least we've got something to work with, but I'm not sure we can, adopt it at this meeting based on the number of changes.
There are a lot. Mark, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I think.
Shall we withdraw it and
look, I don't think you need to. I don't think the report needs to lie on the table. No, because there's a whole lot of other stuff that's in your work program. One of the items. Look, my recommendation is, if you're noting in the minutes the additions to the work program to be circulated, I'd recommend that you do adopt this work program subject to the changes being made and circulated to the committee shortly, so that what's actually there is adopted as your work program.
I think that's by far the most sensible suggestion. I don't see why we can't fix it now, subject to later ratification, right, by the rest of the committee. Given that we've got a light attendance today, including the Mayor and the Chief Executive, who have an interest in this issue as well.
Well, I'll come to you in a minute, Councillor. Then I suggest we do something similar to what we did with the legislative report. Approve what we've got, note that we want, but note that these 5 changes are to be made to it. So it doesn't just.
And will be circulated.
It doesn't hang around, lying on the table, sort of not being anything. It's adopted, subject to those changes being made.
Yeah.
Councillor Pavanov?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of comments, and it may not fit in with this paper, but I just want to table some of them anyway. So in relation to the emergency management, earlier on I talked about the climate strategy. It's actually climate and resilience strategy. And I suppose I just want to flag that strategy topic. Well, I suppose the name of that topic, and that actually ties into this emergency management update, and the resilience part of it seems to be missing. I don't know if anyone wants to make any comment about that just now before I go on to my next point.
Just a note, I think the risk that we have referred to and discussed is climate change. The strategy that you're referring to is the climate change and resilience strategy. There was some discussion held at the climate environment strategy about this issue, and discussed with the think tank that was set up, and the importance of resilience being incorporated and included in that strategy, discussed in a lot of degree, and it was agreed that it was an important component of that strategy. So the name was changed to the Climate Change and Resilience Strategy. So I can confirm that. That has gone through council committees and was resolved.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
I mean, the objective of this committee taking these over, these two, not taking them over, but adding these 2 things to the agenda, response as opposed to recovery, was designed to provide a home for staff who are currently separately working on response as opposed to recovery, and that this would be a place where they would have their place in the sun, so to speak, where councillors are involved in the work that they're doing. That's all. That was why we had them along on two occasions, and why we decided we should continue to provide the home for that work being done within council.
May I add, Chair,
Chris,
to that?
yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you. I think I'd just like to endorse the comment made by David to say that our work with Remo, we are working really hard to ensure that we are lifting the focus not just on response but to recovery. So pre-disaster recovery, as you know, is a critical element of supporting resilience for communities, and the fact that there's an opportunity to ensure that it is covered by the risk related to our community, I think is an important facet of it being here, and that was discussed, I believe, in the kōrero previously.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, David, for your comments. So the other one I just wanted to mention too is the enterprise risk, the top 10 organisational risks. And so I suppose, that work is reported to a number of our other committees, our main committee and our social sustainability and our climate and environment committee. And I suppose what I want to highlight too is having a forward work program, I suppose, is it's identifying, I suppose, the subsets of this work. I mean, I'll just rephrase that. It's highlighting that their work programs also need to feed into this here as well, not necessarily at the level, but how they're actually all connected. It's fine having this work program, but those other ones have got to have work programs which are met as well. And I have to say, with the climate and environment subcommittee or committee, this year there've been 2 meetings that have been cancelled because there haven't been enough items on the agenda, even though there is a forward work program.
I can.
No?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor. So, look, if I understand the question, you're saying within the top 10 organisational risk report, there's a risk on climate change, and so there should be a work program with your committee that feeds into this.
Yes, they're all connected. Somehow, not necessarily feeds into being provided to this committee, but they're all linked.
Yeah, well, the update. So the top 10 organisational risk report is to this committee on our organisation's top 10, and we look at that on a monthly basis. We look at the controls. We evaluate those controls, and that determines whether there's risk treatments. So those updates will take into account work that's being discussed at various committees, but the top 10 organisational risk report only comes to this committee. You know, that's
Yes.
one of the primary delegations of this committee. Other committees will have different work programs. The Risk and Assurance Committee has a very specific work program.
I know it does, yeah.
So yes, there's connections, but we can't necessarily. We've got to be clear on what is this committee's work program.
Yes, because I suppose, as I mentioned earlier on, there was no mention of the environment strategy, and that is actually part of that top, it's written into that top 10.
So I think
organisational
the
plan.
top 10 organisational risk report could be, at the next update, it may reflect the change to the control.
Okay.
Yeah, Chris, do you want to just...
Yeah, I did just want to add, I was just flicking through the risk treatments for the item in this list. So there's the independent audit of the council's emissions inventory, internal external climate education program, the coastal erosion district plan change, the flood risk plan change, update to the council's emissions reduction plan, and it is the climate change and resilience strategy, so we'll update that title. I believe that those items do align to the Climate and Environment Committee's schedule. So there is alignment there, but take the point that you have made, and we will take that back as we look at next year to make sure that there's a clear indication of where those updates are coming through to that committee next year.
Thank you, Chris. And I suppose just, and I know this has been pedantic too, but on page 98, under 10, it's got climate change and environment. It's got here no climate change considerations in this report. The environment comment is actually left out, and I have to say this is not the only report that this occurs in.
Yeah, that is pedantic.
Yes, okay, yes.
Thank you.
Any other issues? No, right. We've got a revised motion, which I think everyone agreed with from the tone of the discussion, councillors. Thank you. Yes, I will. I'll do that. They are separating out emergency management response and recovery, the Standard & Poor's rating, the independent rating, local water, the annual plan, and the capital program moving out 1 month. So those are the 5. And presumably someone can work off the recording of the meeting. Yeah. So those are what I would expect to see when this report comes out between now and Christmas. Mark assures me within the next week or so. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. No. Okay. So the motion is that the Risk and Assurance Committee approves its forward work program to September 2025 as set out in Appendix 1 to this report, subject to the additions and amendments agreed at this meeting. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you. Seconder? Ayes? No?
Aye.
Was that a no? Aye. Oh, it's delayed aye. Thank you. Right, we're now on to 9.6. Only a couple of pages over. 9.6 is on page 100. Mark, you want to speak to this?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, just going back, sorry, before I do, just going back to the forward work program, thank you for that. That was a really good process. So the work program is your work program, and I think the mechanism how we dealt to the changes to the work program were really, really good. So we actually haven't had an instance where you've changed the work program. So thank you for that. That was a great process. So welcome to Sharon. I am going to probably, unfortunately, Sam. This is a control finding from Ernst & Young. I'm going to hand over to Sharon. And typically, what we do is we actually we've learned from the past to hand over to EY to talk to their own report. So this is a new process. This committee oversees the audit process of the long-term plan as well as the annual report. So this is a standard process. It's a management letter. EY have noted some observations, 6 observations. Management have had an opportunity to consider and to respond. But most importantly, unfortunately, Sam couldn't be with us today just due to some diary conflicts and travelling for work. So, discussing this report with Sam last night, he felt on balance probably most of the questions would be directed at me rather than him. So I will hand over to Sharon so that we employ the normal process that we do with reports.
Thank you, Mark, and through you, Mr. Chair. Just want to acknowledge that it's Fraud Awareness Week this week. Would seem remiss of me not to have that in the minutes for this committee. Yes, control findings from EY. This is the first time we've had from them with regards to LTP and bringing it to you. Process is exactly the same as what you're accustomed to. We've acknowledged and accepted all of the commentary from EY. We regard these as key improvements and learnings. At our pre-committee briefing, we did discuss with the 2 independents that on first read, it can look quite negative and not necessarily highlight all the good work and what we achieved. But The answer to that is our auditors are here to look at that fine detail, find out what component parts of our complete process caused them difficulties, caused us difficulties, and caused you difficulties as an elected member group. And in there, I think there's a part to play from all of us going forward. The sequencing for this will be a bit longer than our normal control finding timeframe. We've got up until the next LTP in order to complete these. Having said that, EY will check in as part of their year-end annual audit to see how we're going. And in that regard, I will include these in your omnibus report on control findings, noting that it will probably just be in progress for quite some time. Thank you.
Councillor Coe?
Yeah, look, when you read it, it sounds quite damning in a way. But well, I guess, you know, having lived through it, it was a little bit shambolic at times, and there was some last-minute changes that significantly changed the direction of certainly of the consultation document. I guess my feeling is that this is one side of the story from the auditor's perspective. I think it would be really valuable to also get the elected members' perspective on the process, and to maybe do a bit of a workshop kind of thing on how can we do better next time around, because certainly from an elected member's perspective, there were some issues in the sense that we made some upfront assumptions about not changing service levels and not changing staffing levels and so on, which then railroaded us down a path of either a significant rate increase or contravening our financial strategy that we'd agreed to. And that wasn't a comfortable situation for us to be in. So I think a bit of a debrief with elected members as well to complement the audit perspective would be quite a useful thing to do before we get into the next LTP, which of course will be a new council looking at that. But yeah, there are some learnings, I think, you know, in terms of how can we all do it better, because elected members, you know, probably had some failings in this process as well. I think, yeah, it could have gone a lot more smoothly. But yeah, we had a tough job ahead of us. But I think, you know, that's no reason to say we can't just look at it and say how could we have done better, and can we? Are there some procedures we can put in place to make sure we don't have such a shambles at the end as we had, where we were just really pushed up against some quite significant deadlines that, you know, didn't give us a lot of room to move.
Thank you, Councillor Coe. Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea to me. But my observation was it was grim reading on the second and third readings as well, not just the first reading. It basically says the system didn't work and the staff and councils were pretty hopeless. And that's not a good place to leave things. And I suggest that it's, because we'll disappear too in the next election, that it's not suitable to have 3 years of report saying it's a work in progress and then have another shambles in 3 years' time. There are learnings to be got. I don't know how you want to do it. Maybe you want to have leave it to the new year and have a session. You probably need David and I as well, because we were guilty parties as well. And you know, we can all see that people had bright ideas right up until the 11th hour, and at some point you've got to stop. That's one fairly obvious thing. So I don't want to see 3 years of work in progress. We're working on it. Oh my God, we've got another shambles. That's not going to work.
Yeah, we need to sort it out sooner rather than later. Yeah. And while it's fresh,
I quite agree with you, David. Absolutely. But I just wanted to say, look, pity Sam's not available, but he doesn't pull any punches. Let's be clear. I mean, he talks about delays in them getting information. He talks about inconsistent format or inconsistent information being provided. He talks about lack of linkages between, say, capital investment strategy and other parts of the rates strategy and the financing strategy. So there's quite a lot to absorb there. And I think, as I said, it will be a learning curve for everybody. But we take note of Sam's comments. They are quite hard-hitting, and we need to respond to hard-hitting comments by having a good review. And I think having a discussion in the new year would be a good way of doing it. I have to say, from my point of view, one of the issues was the extent which councillors were involved in driving the processes here, and that's a plus. But it's also a minus when it comes to getting things done on time. Sometimes, if you guys would just rubber stamp what the officers put to you, it would be much easier, right? And you didn't.
Yeah, right. That's
And
going to
that's-
Yeah,
No,
thank-
but that's a strength. That's a strength, and that's what we expect of a council is engaged. And my observation of the process was that councillors were very involved in this, and all the costs that involved. So, look, by all means, it's quite a hard-hitting report. There are messages to be learned, but we can do better, and we need to make clear the lessons learned sooner, rather to document and agree on the lessons learned sooner rather than later, as David says. But I think it's a very useful report. It's constructive and it's useful, even though it doesn't pull any punches, as I say. Right?
Mark?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, a few comments from me. So, look,
nameless.
Look, we pride ourselves on our relationship with our auditors. We work very well, and we always debrief with them on the annual report. Look, I absolutely accepted everything that EY raised, but not for a second do I think our LTP process was a shambles. I really don't. I think the word shambles is unfair. I think I think I think there's a fine line between what the Office of the Auditor General dictates and what's political. And I think the consultation document that this council actually sent out to consultation was actually hitting the big ticket items.
Yep.
So the Office of the Auditor General didn't agree with the self-insurance fund, and so we took it off. But it actually was a very good thing to potentially consult on. So the project management, I agree with that. We failed before we even started. So audit will always come in and audit from January to March, because they have to audit everything that gets fed into the consultation document. So the key learning there, and senior leadership team has already debriefed internally, you break the long-term plan up into component parts and you do a whole lot earlier. And so our new approach will be, when you adopt the annual plan for year 3 of the current long-term plan, the council will be adopting the draft financial strategy, the draft infrastructure strategy, the draft DC policy. So you can break it into component parts. So the bit about project management was fair. Democracy must prevail, and it is your right to chop and change your mind. We workshopped with you. First of all, before Christmas, it was a grant to Ngā Manu. After Christmas, it wasn't. After Christmas, it wasn't the self-insurance fund. We modelled different rates increases, and that's always going to happen. And it should happen. As we got more information and you got into the debate, we changed things. Yes, staff had to do a lot more work. For the previous long-term plan, we had a lot more consultants at the council. We had a project manager. We didn't have that, but it also didn't cost as much. That long-term plan was landed on time, and it was landed to budget, and it's a very good long-term plan. The financial strategy has been endorsed, and that's why we retained our credit rating. A lot of our neighbours haven't retained their credit rating. They got downgraded. So I had a long chat to Sam about this. I don't quite see it as a damning report as you do. I think it's fair. I think we have to change the way we do things. I think we can do things a lot earlier. But I wouldn't be bringing in a whole lot more staff, because from the outset, the specialists that we need are here in the council. So I think it's fair. I don't believe that the LTP was a shambles. I don't believe that we ran a shambolic process either. Yep, we had lots of feedback on change this word, the messaging of the consultation document. We could not get all of you around the table to agree, so we had to take it to a smaller panel. So that's what we've learned, and we've actually applied that to the new annual plan process. And if you, I'm sure you've already noticed, we're actually doing the annual plan a different way. So it's good. We've never had a report from EY on areas for improvement. It's not a shambles, it's not shambolic. They are fair, and we will run a better process next time round. But we ended up, as I said, on time, on budget. There's some councils that still haven't adopted a long-term plan. So perhaps I was meant to read this and go, oh my God, the world's come to an end, but I didn't. I thought it was fair. And there are some good learnings there, but full credit to the council, to our independents, and full credit to staff. We ended up with a great product.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
The consultation document that went out was an excellent document. So we got there in the end with a great product. Don't want to take away from that. It was a rather fraught process. It wasn't a shambles. It was fraught, and we made some substantial changes kind of on the fly, and staff did really, really well, I have to say, coping with those changes that were signalled by elected members that they wanted. And that's why I think we need to bring elected members into this review process, because I think we contributed to how it evolved. So I think there's learnings all round in terms of, how can we all do it better for next time, so that none of us feel kind of railroaded and the staff aren't panicking because we've just suddenly reconfigured the whole thing and they have to start away modelling again. It's a team effort, and we're all accountable for how it pans out, not just staff. So I just think it would be really good to review it. And if I can just divert slightly onto the financial strategy, because I know the self-insurance thing, which is a great concept, but I think there are some issues around how we're communicating our financial strategy. We've picked that up in terms of the annual plan. Yeah. So I think that's just an area that needs a lot more work, is how we communicate our financial strategy and what the implications are for rates and how we do things going forward. And I think if we can work with the community on that, then it paves the way for more acceptance of where we're heading, in terms of our future annual plans and long-term plans. I was trying to recall whether the financial strategy was put out for consultation. It was?
Yes.
But was it put out in a format that people could understand easily where we were coming from? And how much response do we get back from it? Do we need to do more engagement somehow around that so that people understand where we're heading?
Thank you, Councillor. Mark has made the point that, and I agree with him, that there were a lot of balls on the table at once, because a lot of the strategies and things were being dealt with, and maybe the answer is to sort some of your strategies first, then use them as the base for your long-term plan, rather than trying to adjust them to suit your long-term plan. And I was annoyed a bit with EY, because it didn't really show that everyone was working really hard and nobody was trying to thwart the process. Everyone was trying to get it right. There were I didn't see any evidence anywhere of any councillor or staff member trying to undermine it or get their own way at the expense of anybody else. Everyone had the right attitude, trying to get it right. And it was hard, and it was a lot of work, and that work that doesn't get recognised. Just before you to come up, I'm a bit annoyed that Sam isn't here, because I had 3 questions for him, and I'll tell you what they were, because they might feed into the workshop. The first one is a question of fact. Does the Auditor General endorse EY's view, or is this EY's view that then goes to the Auditor General? And should we be worried about the Auditor General coming thundering down Transmission Gully with his keyboard warriors to beat us up, or not? It's just been filed with the Auditor General, and does the Auditor General say, oh yeah, okay, that's another one? Or are they going to be doing so? I don't know. The next one, which I wanted to know, was, this is 6th of November's report. Was he raising his problems at the time? And if he wasn't getting satisfaction, was he taking them to the chief executive or the mayor, or was he dealing with the staff who were dealing with him? Did he elevate it? Because it's nice to hear all these things, and it's good that they've done it because we can learn from it, but could we have done it a bit better if we'd known a bit earlier, like before the end of June? And the third question I'm going to ask him, and I will in March if he turns up, how do we compare with other councils? This is a little bit like a school report for your kids. You think, God, that's awful. And then you find out that the teacher's grumpy and has given everybody a bad report. Or are we the worst of the EY's clients? Where do we sit in the process? We don't need to deal with them too much now, but they're things that I think he has to answer at some point. Sorry, Mark, do you want to say something? Then I'll go to the two councils.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Look, two of the three. So these are questions that we'll put to Sam, and we'll wait for Sam's responses. But two of the three I can answer. Whether we're this West client, I can't answer that. But in terms of is the Office of the Auditor General concerned? What's the process? What I explained to David before the meeting kicked off is that Sam did have to sit down with the Auditor General, give his view of where we're at with the consultation document, highlight any concerns, risks, what's outstanding, what are the findings, and they have a discussion. There's been instant and incredible communication with EY. As part of the long-term plan, the OAG does what's called it's either a hot review or a cold review of your consultation document before that, because they actually issue an opinion on your consultation document. And the first one that went to OAG, they had signalled to Sam, well, we're going to qualify it, which is why we had that meeting under urgency to work through the issues. So there has been very clear, very frequent communication between Sam, the OAG and us. Where we got to at the end of the day, we have had a clean audit opinion from the OAG. That where to from here, the OAG writes a report to the Crown summarising their audits of Council's long-term plan. We won't appear in that in a negative sense that we haven't actually, we've had a qualified opinion or we haven't completed a long-term plan. So that's the end of it. They would have seen the control findings, but they wouldn't have seen our response. So that's that. The second question, or I think there's two, I think I've answered both. Very clear communication. Sam was communicating to myself, senior leadership team was communicating amongst ourselves, and we were communicating with you because we had a couple of those urgent, unscheduled meetings. But how we rank in terms of the other council clients that EY has, I'd be interested to know as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Thank you, councillors, for your patience. Councillor Kirby, be patient a wee bit longer. Councillor Provanov was first. And
yeah, thank you. And I think there's been enough conversation around this report, and I think it's about taking it forward and learning from it where we can, and putting those actions in place. But one thing I actually wanted to ask, and Sam, and it doesn't seem to be mentioned in there, is in the consultation report, there tends to be a document that actually provides questions for our community to answer, and there's no comment in there on that, and I know that we've had issues with some of these questions for other consultations we've done. So I'm interested to know whether or not there was any discussion around that, and whether or not they were considered to be, good, open, non-confusing questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just very quickly. So part of the audit of the consultation document is they look at the questions that we're asking. So if you're asking a question, you have to give options. You have to show, if yes, what is the impact on rates, levels of service and borrowings? If no. So their first review of our first consultation document is that it wasn't clear what we were consulting on. They felt some of the topics, it was confusing, there wasn't clarification, which is why they had signalled to us that if we actually went out with no changes, there would be a qualification. When we actually got the clean audit opinion on the consultation document that we went out with, part of their process is they actually audit our process. So we've gone to consultation, we've had so many submissions, we've had the hearings. how have we considered that? How has that impacted on the final decisions that council make? So they actually audit that. So they first of all audit the clarity of our consultation documents, and then the second part is they audit what have we done and what changes have we made as a result of the submissions. And if they find that we've had a number of submissions on something that we actually haven't made a change on, that could lead to a qualification. So it's not just an audit of the financials; it's the whole process.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Kirby.
When I read this, I thought it reflected actually really well the difficulty of our long-term plan process, because it was complex and it was hard. There were a lot of moving parts, and I think when EY's putting this into play, they're observing from an external perspective what they saw. When we were in amongst it, it was hard. And what I read through this is that the fact that we landed a consultation document that was a clear audit report, and we landed an LTP that had a clear audit report, just to me shows the amount of work that was done by the council team. And when I say that, I mean elected members and staff within the tight timeframes that were involved, and our audit team from EY, how much work they had to do to enable us to get through those processes. So I read it, yes, it's a bit of it reads really dark, but in behind it, I know we had a really good process through that. And yeah, there were some moving things, and it was complex and it was hard. I've never worked through one before. But when I see the amount of complexity across our workers' council and what's happening, for us to land in those spaces with the results that we did, and have a reflection like this that comes back and says, yeah, you've got some improvements, just says to me next time, we're going to be A+, really, because we're going to get through this stuff and learn some things. So I think it's helpful from that perspective. But really how I read it is it just signals this was a really complex process, and we got some great results that we could not have got if there wasn't a lot of hard work behind the scenes. And so, yeah, that's my thing. I think it actually highlights we're doing really well as a council.
Thank you, Councillor. Any more comments? Can I have someone then to move that we receive a report and note that management accepts the Ernst & Young long-term plan control findings? Before I ask that, I'd just like to say that I really appreciate the free and frank way the management have responded to it. I mean, it would have been really easy to put the shutters up and make a case for the defence. To your credit, you haven't, and it makes me feel much more confident going forwards.
I'm just wondering, do we want to add in a bit about having a follow-up workshop early in the new year with elected members and maybe with the guy from Sam as well, just to record some learnings and look at processes for next time round?
Yeah, do we need to put that in the motion, or do we just?
I would suggest that we minute that, but I would
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
just minute it.
We'll minute it, but
Okay.
we'll make sure it appears in the minutes, and
Right.
so that it doesn't get overlooked.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So will someone move, please? Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. And ayes? Noes?
Aye.
Right, thank you. And so that's passed with a note in the minutes that a workshop to be held before the 11th of March. Right, next item is the confirmation of the minutes, I think.
Yes, it is. Page 118.
Right, that's it, 118. Any discussion on the minutes?
I move.
He's early. It's getting late over there, is it, David?
I was about to tell you, it's nearly 20 to 11 in the evening, and it's time
Time you went to bed.
had my sleep.
Yeah,
Yes,
bedtime.
exactly.
Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ayes? Aye. Noes? All right, that deals with that. Now we're about to go to public excluded. So allow a minute or two for. We've got to move it. I also just want to make sure that the web thing's open.
So we'll move
and stuff. Okay. Righto, where is it? Here we go. All right. Well, I'll move from the chair that we go into public excluded, if that makes sense. Someone second that? Thank you. The reasons are all set out on page 126. Thank you.
Do you need to vote? Ayes?
Aye, yeah, ayes and noes, right, ayes. Right, we're there. Thank you. Yeah, yeah, just wait till we get this sorted. And
David, it now being 20 to 11.